So, yeah, here to talk about the Green Homes Grant. But before we do that, I'm just going to quickly run through. I'm not quite sure how much people on the call here already know about Plymouth Energy Community, so I just wanted to make sure we cover that. So Plymouth Energy Community, we are a community-led organisation. We have about best part of 100 members who take an active part in managing our organisation, and over significantly over 500 supporters who offer their support to the organisation and kind of keep in touch with this. And we are also a charity, so we operate not for profit in a number of different ways. So there's information here around what our core mission is. Slightly more practically, in terms of what we've done, there's kind of two really developed sides to the work we do, and one of those is about renewable energy in the city. So we own renewable solar installations on many community buildings around the city, and also this array in Ernesettle. And this array is on a piece of land that really can't be used for much because of the condition and where it is next to a MOD munitions yard and a sewage treatment plant. There's not a lot you can do with that land, and so we've got a 5 megawatt solar array, and all of our solar resources have a number of benefits to the communities they're housed within. So there are people in the city and further away who have all invested in those resources, and they're getting a rate of return for their investment. And so those are, ordinary people really. In addition to that, there's obviously, we're displacing fossil fuels from the grid by putting these in place, but I think more importantly for me and where I come from, we've got the host organisations, so schools and community buildings, which are benefiting from cheaper electricity. And all of these resources are generating a community benefit fund, which is going back into doing really good work within those communities for people on lower incomes, people in fuel poverty, and that side of things. So we've raised about £2.5 million worth of community shares to fund these, so there's quite a lot of scale of that. And on the other side of things, we've got a really well-established energy advice team. And the focus of that advice really is fuel poverty in the city, huge problem in the city, and our advisors do amazing work, ranging from really practical measures, like Kathy's doing there, in terms of fitting draft proofing, to actually really in-depth complex work with households that are vulnerable and need a lot of support to access all sorts of services from benefits and other advice providers in the city. So some really life-changing work that goes ahead with that. And there's these are actually last year's figures. We're about to update those, so it's a shame we didn't have some from the last year, because I think they'll be even more impressive actually. But you can see there that the work that we did within the last calendar year, or the last kind of financial year for us really, or operational year, the householders that were helped within that year will have made nearly £500,000 worth of savings on their bills within a year following advice. So it's a big impact on the city. There's that much kind of more money in people's pockets in the city. So yeah, we do lots of interesting work, and just to be really clear there, we're not coming from at the Green Homes Grant, and we're not coming at this piece of advice really with any agenda. We're not going to be making any money out of anything we say. We are really here to serve the community that we're within with the best advice and support we can. So that brings us on to the reason we're here today, and the Green Homes Grant. So we're going to run through just a bit of clarity in terms of what it is offering, and some of the measures that are available for that. We'll do a bit more depth guidance about retrofitting your home. So that's not really related, not linked directly to the Green Homes Grant, but just things you need to consider if you are making changes to your home. And then a little bit of information about actually trying to make a decision about whether the Green Homes Grant is something that's right for you to go ahead with. A little bit of information on choosing and finding an installer, and a little bit of information on further advice that might be available and good sources for that advice. And that should wrap it up with some time for questions from there. Have we had any questions or comments so far that it's worth picking up on?
Just if anyone's having any problems at all, just write it in the chat box. I know someone isn't able to hear us at the moment. If that's just one person, then you know, we are recording it. So if you're having some technical problems like that, you can always watch it back on the recording at a later date.
Okay, good. So, Claire, I'm going to leave it to you to take us through what it is.
Okay, I'm going to give you an overview of what the scheme is. We'll also talk a little bit about eligibility. There are two types of scheme in it, what it can be used for, the measures that you might want to try and access through it, and then also some common misconceptions. It is a government scheme. It does have things that you can and can't do. It can be a little confusing. So we've picked out the key things that perhaps you might be interested in and said whether those will be covered or not. So if we start with what it actually is, it's a £2 billion government funded scheme. As I said, there are two levels really. The first is a £5,000 grant, of which you would pay a third. So for example, if it was a £5,000 grant, you're accessing the full amount, you would pay £2,500 for a total load of works of £7,500. Or there is also a £10,000 scheme that requires no match funding from you. And that's if you're on a low income or if you're on qualifying benefits. I do go on to show those benefits in a second, actually. So if that might apply to you, in a couple of slides, you can have a quick scan and see what's on there. Interestingly, it's quite a challenging time frame. The programme is due to end on the 31st of March 2021. That is not a long time to spend £2 billion, as you can imagine. But it is open now. You can apply now if you think you may be making use of it. Yes, so let's have a little look at the eligibility then. So you live in England and you own your own home, and that includes shared ownership, which is important to know. That was a grey area that some people weren't sure about. So shared ownership is absolutely fine. You would be able to access this. You own your own park home on a residential site, and that does include gypsy and traveller sites. Or you're a residential landlord in private or social rented sector. If you are a tenant, there is nothing to stop you asking your landlord if they would apply for that grant funding. And importantly, at the end, you cannot get the Green Homes grant for newly built homes that haven't been lived in before. So that's one of those things where it wouldn't apply. So let's have a look at that £10,000 sector of the scheme. And here's the qualifying benefits for that. It's what you'd expect to see, actually. It tends to be income-based benefits. There are some disability benefits there as well. Working tax credit, housing benefits. We've got a lot of people joining us, actually. Welcome aboard if you're just coming in. So I'll leave that up just for a second, just have a quick scan through. As Justin said earlier, we will be sending this out, so don't feel like you need to be frantically scribbling notes to keep up. Okay, we'll go on to the next one. So let's have a little look at what it can be used for. So the overall aim of it is to allow people to make their home more energy efficient, to retrofit, as they say, your home, so that it's more comfortable, it's cheaper to run basically, and it's better for your health. We have got a lot of people joining us. Sorry if I seem a little distracted. It pops up right in the middle of my screen when you join. But welcome, Jane. I can see you. For this scheme, there are primary measures, and your primary measure is a gateway. It's a gateway to the secondary measures that you can take up only if you've taken up the primary measures. So that might sound confusing, but we'll go through what those primary measures are, and you can judge for yourself whether there is something that fits your home and your circumstances. So let's have a look at the primary measures first, and we'll start with insulation. Solid wall insulation, also known as external wall insulation, is generally for older properties built prior to 1930, you're likely to know if you live in a solid wall home. If you've got one of the many Victorian or Georgian terraces in Plymouth, that will be you. Also, you can tell the difference between a solid wall and a cavity wall pretty much by the lay of the bricks, and that's of no help to you if you have some render on, I do realise, but a surveyor would be able to tell you that. However, if you can see your bricks, if it looks like how you used to build your Lego as a child, if it's even and it's the same size bricks and they're beautifully overlapped, it's probably cavity wall. If it's a little more mixed up and you have smaller bricks between the two, chances are you're looking at a solid wall. A lot of people have cavity wall insulation already, not many have solid wall insulation. Other insulation measures in this primary set are underfloor, and that's whether you've got solid or a suspended floor. Loft insulation, many people have that, but this will include a top up if you had it years and years ago and you don't have so much. Generally, if you've got 150 mil or less on loft. Flat roof insulation, it's also including room in roof. The room in roof one is interesting. It brings in one of the other eligibility factors. It should have a fixed form of heating. So if you're just converting your loft and you're thinking, oh, I'll get in early and I get some room in roof insulation, chances are that's not going to work for you unless you've got a fixed form of heating. And also park home insulation, which can vary greatly. So if there's anyone that's relevant to, please do pop something in the comments now, and we'll have a look for you later, or maybe have a chat to you. So those are the primary measures. I can give you an idea of some of the costs, but I'll do that after I've been through the second slide. So that's the insulation measures covered. A second is low carbon heating. So there are 4 listed there. There's your air source heat pump, ground source heat pump, solar thermal. Importantly, that is not solar PV. So that's not your electricity generating panels that you see on a lot of roofs. This is purely for your hot water, solar thermal. And then this probably isn't that relevant for people within Plymouth, to be honest, generally these outlying areas, rural areas, but biomass pellet boilers. Just to skim through some of the approximate costs on those, if you're thinking that perhaps solid wall insulation is for you, you've probably spent your whole grant. You would have spent your whole grant on that. It's around £10,000. Cavity wall insulation, you're looking at around £1,000. On the floor is variable. Actually, it can be quite complex with solid floors. Loft should be around £500, room in roof 2,000 to 3,000, and a park home will be variable. Air source, ground source, solar thermal, you do have the renewable heat incentive that will make up a case as to whether you think you want to install those measures or not. You'll also want to make sure they're correctly sized. If they're oversized, they aren't particularly efficient. You'll also want to make sure that your house isn't very leaky. They can do with good airtight houses to work. They work at a lower level of heat, and so it's quite important. Not much is escaping. So those are your primary measures. Those are your gateway measures. And once you've been through that, you can access the secondary measures. It's the secondary measures that caused quite a lot of interest when it came out because, well, we'll go on to them and I'll discuss the reasons why. And it's the second one that's there, but I'll start with draft proofing. Secondary measure can include draft proofing. That's very important for comfort. Actually, a room can be as warm as you like, but if it's the wind is whistling past your ankles or around your neck, you can feel ever so chilly. It's the double glazing that really attracted attention when this scheme came out, and there was confusion. And people with 1970s, 1980s double glazing, which isn't particularly great and desperately want to upgrade, unfortunately are excluded from this. You can only upgrade double or triple glazing from single. And that was a disappointment for people, but unfortunately it is a limitation of the scheme. However, secondary glazing, that's a good thing to be able to have if you do still have some single glazing, especially if you're in a heritage zone or places you can't do a lot of work to the outside, you're under some restrictions. Secondary glazing can be a way to make sure you're staying warmer. And also the doors. The doors is an interesting one. Energy efficient replacement doors, front and back, but only if you had them installed before 2002. So again, it might work for you, but there are some caveats. And moving on, our secondary heating measures also include heating controls. And those are well worth looking at. The work that we do with the energy team often includes putting in TRVs, thermostatic radiator valves, and heating controls, and they do make a big difference. Things such as the hot water tank insulation, I'm not sure whether you might not be a bit better off walking into a DIY store and picking one of those up, in all honesty, or maybe even giving us a ring. Yeah, but they're all things that can come under these secondary measures. And on to the next one. So some common misunderstandings. I did say there were some misconceptions about the scheme. You cannot, unfortunately, as I've mentioned, upgrade your old double glazing. I have yet to find a scheme that allows that, and when I do, it will be a happy day. You cannot use this scheme to install a new gas boiler. You can't install solar PV panels, solar thermal only, as we mentioned earlier. That's out of scope. You can't insulate a room if it hasn't got fixed central heating. So for example, if you've had, like I say, there a new extension, or if you just started to put a room in your roof, you're probably not quite there yet, unfortunately. You most certainly can't pay for works that have already been done, which is a great shame. And you can't pick any contractor. They have to be accredited. They have to be signed up to deliver the scheme. More and more are signing up. You'll have noticed, I'm sure, the chat in the press and the buzz around it, and a lot of that is around the lack of contractors and the lack of capacity in the market to be able to take up the demand that there will be from this. There's a lot of interest in this scheme, and there aren't a huge amount of contractors. We're told it's increasing every day, but it will present some challenges, and so sadly you can't pick any contractor. There are some things on the plus side, put a nice green happy tick there. There are some things that you can cover that you might not anticipate. So this is quite good news, a good news slide. You can do your design drawings and calculations. So that's brilliant. You want to make sure you're well prepared before you start putting things into your home, start retrofitting. Damp specialist, structural engineer costs, again, fabulous stuff to make sure that your house is in the right state before you start making any sort of dramatic changes. Moisture risk, you do want to evaluate your moisture risk. Making changes to your home, if done badly or if not thought through, can cause damp. Estimated payback. Cost is important to a lot of people, payback time. To others it's not, and it's more about taking care of the home, or it might be an ethical decision that you're making. It will also pay for air tightness tests, which is great, especially if you're considering some of the renewable heat measures that you can put in through the scheme. Contractor costs, this is all good to see. Labour and materials, scaffolding, waste removal. And this is a nice one, we like this. Reasonable enabling work to support the retrofit. Now, necessary is an important word. Necessary structural improvements. For example, if you have a roof that you know needs replacing, you won't be able to say it's a necessary structural improvement, unfortunately. That's part of maintaining the fabric of your house, and they won't be covering things like that. But enabling works, repairing and treating damp, for example, before you get your external wall insulation or your cavity wall insulation, that's all fine, and that's all within scope. As is the ventilation, again, which is very important. Costs not covered. It's what you'd expect, really. So it's anything that's not linked to the retrofit. Re-roofing we've mentioned, damp proofing we've mentioned. That would just be in a schedule of keeping your house, in good order. This is a bit of a shame. The householder costs, the final one, furniture storage and removal isn't covered, nor is alternative accommodation costs during the disruption. And I think that's the last one for me. So if anybody's got a burning question that you want to type in, please feel free to do it now. But we will have time at the end also if you want to talk about your own circumstances and what might or might not fit.
Should say as well, there is some more information further down about sources of advice, and those advice has got really good information about the individual measures. So we've erred on the side of not including lots of information about the individual measures here, with the view that perhaps that's something that if you're looking for a particular measure, then following some of those links and doing the reading there might be a good idea.
Fred has his hand up. It's very well done, Fred. You've used this before.
I'm just going to see if I can yes. Fred, I've allowed you to unmute, so you should be able to unmute yourself. You are muted at the moment, though, Fred, if you did have a question that you were asking. Okay, perhaps we'll move on. If you did have a question, Fred, and you're just in the process of unmuting yourself, do jump in. But otherwise, we'll move on. I might assume that
Mark's asked, will you be able to provide a list of accredited contractors?
Yeah, there's a slide on contractors later on in terms of where you can find accredited contractors. Yeah, we'll come to that later on. I'll just park that one for the moment. Yeah, excellent. So I'll move on. So I've got a section here. I want to just take a step back from the grant, because what we want to see is lots of householders in Plymouth benefiting from the Green Homes Grant, but the key word there is benefiting. And we know from the coverage in the press and from our experience of these schemes that things can get quite rushed in them. Installers are trying to get through an awful lot of work very quickly, and it is possible that their interests and yours don't fully align, or that your home might be, a bit more complicated, and there are some risks then to running through that scheme. And I think it's worth dropping back to think about why you want to do it, some of the risks that might happen in your home that just need a bit of thought before you leap in and take advantage of a nice offer. Because, as I say, what we want to see is lots of people benefiting from this scheme and doing some really good work and making a good case for more grants like this to be available in the future. And what we don't want to see is lots of people having work done that they go back and think, oh, I wish I had done this alongside it, or I wish I hadn't done it now and I'd waited a bit and done a bit more work. So I'm going to run through some of that. It may seem a little negative at times, and I just want to outline, I'm kind of painting some of the, as we go further on, I'm painting some of the kind of things that can go wrong, but they're all fully manageable within these schemes. So that's a kind of start of that. But the first thing to think of really is why do you want to do it? And it can be very easy to bypass that question in terms of thinking about what you want to get out of it. I mean, these are all really good reasons on the slide here: comfort, avoiding waste, cutting your bills, for the environment, and to make a better or more valuable home. All of those things are achievable within, doing this sort of work on your home. All of those things might be achievable within one set of works, but actually, depending on what you do, will depend on you fulfill any of these criteria, and where you spend your money will depend on where you do that. So I'm just going to move on. Comforts are one of those. I think most of those are fairly well understood. I think we know that more insulation or a more efficient heating system will avoid waste and will cut your bills, and it's going to be better for the environment. And it's increasingly well understood that a more energy efficient home is a more valuable home. That's your aim. But there's one of them which I think is less well understood, and that is comfort. There we are. So I just wanted to talk about that for a moment, because I think the thing we mostly look at when we think, are we comfortable in our home, is many of us will have a thermostat in the house somewhere that will be set at a temperature, and we'll set that at a temperature in order to make us comfortable. And so that might be, this house, and that might be 22 degrees or 20 degrees. Actually, the air temperature, which is what that's trying to take a reading of, is not one of the main things that dictates how comfortable we are in our home. In fact, the thing that mostly dictates how comfortable we feel anywhere we are in our home is the temperature of the surfaces around us, if you like. So without getting too technical, through kind of infrared waves, we give off heat from our bodies and receive it back from the surfaces around us. So if you're stood next to a really big sash window that has no insulation, so it's a really cold surface, you get this sort of feeling like the heat's being sucked out of you. And similarly, if you stand next to a kind of stove which is burning a log or something like that, you get this sort of feeling that this heat's kind of radiated onto you. Or like a pub garden heater or something like that, you get that same feeling. And that's really important, and you get that in a much smaller way from your walls, from a window, from a floor. So for this picture, for example, the person sat to our right on that sofa is right next to this window that's much colder, and it's going to feel really cold in that room potentially, and for them to be comfortable you might have to turn the thermostat right up to 28 degrees or something. For the person sat on the other side of the sofa, they're right next to a radiator, which might be quite warm, and so they're getting that heat just radiated right onto them, and so they're going to be really warm and they're going to want to be turning down the thermostat. And similarly, so radiation is a really important thing, and how warm the surfaces around you are. And that insulation is a way of achieving that. If that window was double glazed or had secondary glazing, it might make that warmer. The wall was insulated, that will be warmer. The floor is the same. But actually, expensive insulation isn't the only way of achieving this. A really good set of curtains over that window at night, and some secondary glazing, which doesn't have to be hugely expensive, might make an awful lot of difference in its own right. And I think the point here is you can end up in situations where you often think just putting insulation on will make the whole house warmer, or replacing a window will just make the whole house warmer. This is really an example of a situation where the person sat on one side of a sofa is going to be too cold and the other person's going to be too hot, and that's a house that's not working very well. And one that is properly retrofitted would be working much better, and it'd be wherever you are in that house you're going to be comfortable, and that's about doing the work right, and carefully thinking about what you're doing. Another key principle to think about when you're retrofitting your home is where you start. And energy conservation is often something we overlook. And I think what that looks like in terms of if you're trying to conserve energy, heating controls, we mentioned earlier, is a really good thing to look at. A lot of our heating controls aren't very technical, and we might set them, as I say, to 20 degrees or 21 degrees. And what they do, most old heating controls, they tell your boiler to go on full power. It's like, like if you're in a car and you just had your foot pressed to the accelerator until you get to 60 miles an hour, because that's the speed limit where you are. And then you immediately just lift your foot up. And it's not the most efficient way of running things. So a lot of the newer heating controls are much more kind of intelligent with that, and take into account the weather outside and how quickly your house warms up, and they lift that foot on the accelerator as it gets up to the speed that you want it, or the temperature that you want to be. They start to kind of lift that foot, and it stops you from kind of overshooting that temperature and having your house kind of heated a bit too warm, really. And they're also much easier to control, a lot of the newer ones, if you've got a mobile phone and you can have an app to control it with. They're worth thinking about, because they're just stopping up that usage, before you need to use it. But other ways of doing that are just to really understand your usage, and people can use smart meters and energy monitors to do that, but also sometimes just kind of having a go at trying to observe some of the key things, like turning your lights off, you're not leaving windows open, all sorts of kind of things that I don't think I need to run through a list of, because we've heard it many times before, but can be quite important. And it's always the best place to start, because energy conservation costs you nothing, or very little. Moving on, energy efficiency would be the next one. So that is your insulation, but also things like LED bulbs, and that will, and heating systems that will run more efficiently. And that's really important to do next, partially because if you look at it over a long period of time, they generally pay back better than anything else. But also, moving on to the last one, renewable energy, and we covered this a little bit with heat pumps before. Heat pumps, are an example of something that really works best if your home is already quite efficient, and also is cheaper if you buy a smaller one. So the idea that you would have a house that's not very efficient, buy a heat pump that's far too big for that house, and then further down the line, insulate a few things, and then you've got a heat pump that's not working very efficiently because it's far too big for your home, and you spent too much money in the first place buying it. Same is true of a gas boiler. You want the gas boiler sized for the right size of your home. So if you buy the boiler first and then do the efficiency work afterwards, and you're doing that in the wrong order, really, and you're not going to end up with something that's working very well. So I'm now going to run through a few of the risks to retrofitting, and this is a bit, I've prepped you for this, a bit where I get a little bit kind of, alarming, but bear with me. It's sure that we've got a kind of clear view of this really. So I've got two diagrams there that look at modern buildings and older buildings. It's really important to understand the difference between those two things, those two types of building, and what you've got and how that might affect you. And then it shows it quite well. And essentially, to start with a modern building, what you're looking at there is a sealed box. You're looking at walls that are absolutely sealed, shouldn't let water through at all. You're looking at roof, it's the same thing, and you might have, for example, at the floor, you've got this kind of plastic damp-proof membrane that runs across the whole floor that stops any moisture coming up from below, and you'll have damp-proofing kind of running through where windows meet, and so you'll have the kind of damp proofing running through there, and you might have in your loft, you're not just going to have tiles, but underneath that you'll have a layer of kind of membrane or felt that's completely blocking off any damp coming through. So it's a really well sealed unit, and pretty well sealed kind of in terms of, or should be pretty well sealed in terms of air leakage as well. And so then you build in things like extractor fans that allow that air to go out. And the way I look at this, and I'll keep returning to this analogy, but the way I look at the difference between a modern and an older building is a bit like if you're going out for a day on the hills, going for a walk on Dartmoor. A modern building is like a waterproof jacket, really. It's a membrane. It completely blocks off any rain from getting through. And you can kind of control the ventilation. Start walking up the hill, you might undo it, or you might have those zips that unzip somewhere and let a bit of ventilation out. But and you can control that, but for the most part, it's just a complete barrier. Older homes are a bit more like the sheep that you walk past as you go through. So sheep don't tend to get wet through to their skin if they're in a rainstorm, because what they have is hair that have multiple levels of fur that is kind of oils through it and that sort of thing. So it kind of forces the water out and down and drops off. Anybody who's got a dog will know this as well, because particularly dogs that are bred to be outside a lot of the day will get really wet and really muddy when they go out on a walk. And then they'll come back, lie on your carpet, and everything will just come off them straight onto the carpet. And they'll just dry very quickly. And that's kind of how old buildings work. So the materials that you'd use to build the walls are lime, normally made out of lime, and that is a breathable material really, or at least one that lets moisture soak up into it and then breathe out through again. The floor, they're not going to have a block, they're not going to have a damp-proof membrane. They're just going to have, so any moisture that comes up from the ground is just going to be evaporate into the atmosphere inside and then be carried out. And that kind of works. The fact that some water does get in kind of works because they've got good features designed in to make sure not much water gets in. So you've got things like the eaves on a building that are kind of quite far out, and so you're not getting lots of moisture falling onto the walls. And even really simple things like where a windowsill is, you often get a little lip on it, so any moisture just drops down to the floor rather than going onto the wall afterwards. The other thing that's really key to an older building that means that it works is that there's lots of ventilation. There's old chimneys, there's windows that have got quite a lot of moisture running through them, and all of that contributes. So a bit of heating inside and all that ventilation means that any water that is absorbed into the fabric of the building evaporates off really easily because although that material can soak up moisture, it also releases it really easily. And you get this kind of equilibrium where it all kind of works together, and ideally that home should stay dry. So in terms of damp, there are things that cause damp in both of those. If you're not heating the building much, if you're drying lots of clothes inside and that's producing lots of moisture, and you're not using the ventilation strategies that are there, and that might be as simple as opening some windows sometimes, or it might be that somebody's putting in an extractor fan or something like that. If you're not using those, then you are going to get some damp. But when it comes to making changes to those homes, there are differences to the risks. So for a modern building, you can more or less say, as long as you can keep that surface, if you can keep that shell, the outside of that box, watertight, you'll be okay. And you can do that as long as you make sure there's enough ventilation in there. So those are the two things you've got to be careful of. And the only way that fails then is things like maintenance problems. So So what can happen, cavity wall insulation is an example of this, is where you don't keep it watertight, because you can get problems where there's rubble inside the wall, and that's you to pass through. And if you insulate, then it's stopping a lot of kind of ventilation from getting to that rubble, and so that water carries through better, and you also get something called cold bridging, which I'll move on to in a minute on the inside. And so that's what's happening. You've lost that kind of clear block. You've lost that waterproof. Your waterproof jacket's got a hole in it, if you like, and that's what you want to avoid. But that's not a given. All you need to do is make sure that you surveyed the work quite well, and you know what's happening, and then you can go ahead with it from there. So they're less risky, modern buildings, in that sense. But you do need to think about ventilation. For an older building, there's quite a lot of ways that can go wrong. So although a lot of buildings were originally built, as I mentioned, with and were very breathable, a lot of them have been possibly kind of reclad, so re-rendered with cement on the outside, or plastered with gypsum plaster on the inside, which is kind of the more modern methods we might use. So they probably aren't as breathable as they used to be, when they were made out of more breathable materials. And also, for very obvious reasons, people have blocked off chimneys and have kind of tried to replace those leaky windows with something that's not leaving them freezing all winter. And all of that means that some of that way that they used to function isn't working quite as well. And that waterproof coat starts to fail in that way. So that really needs thinking about when you're putting new work in, and some of the solutions to that are you really do have to think about how it's detailed. So by that I mean kind of how it's applied to that building. You maybe have less margin for error there in terms of thinking through how insulation is applied, and how that links with the windows and that side of things. It is better to use what they call vapor open materials, and that might be something like wood fibre, or could be cork, it can be mineral wool, but it's something that allows that wall to still breathe, and lime on the top, but that can carry an extra cost. It's possible to do it with what they call vapor closed materials, so that might be kind of plastic foam insulation, but you have to be really, really careful about things like airflow getting in behind that insulation, or any kind of problems with that, because what you're doing then is you're blocking off the ability for that wall to lose the moisture that it's accumulated. So by and large, you're looking at kind of different kind of materials. So I think the big summary there is, if you have got an older home, it is a bit more risky. It's perfectly possible, and there's all of the insulation, all of the measures that we've listed today are perfectly possible to do to either of these types of homes without having kind of negative impacts around damp. In fact, quite often it can improve issues with damp in these buildings, but it does need a bit more thought, I think, in an older building. So a further risk that can happen in retrofitting, and I think again we're talking, this is an example of external wall insulation, solid wall insulation, and you can see here they've kind of applied it to the outside of the house, but there's two big gaps on there where there's flues. I think there's a flue from a boiler and another kind of vent, I think, I'm not quite sure what that is, where they just haven't really known what to do. You should just extend the flue or the vent and then kind of apply insulation around it. They clearly haven't done that. And similarly around the doors, there's this kind of slightly more interesting plaster work, and again they clearly haven't known what to do there, or just haven't had the time or the budget to cover that. And again, I'm going to stick with my trying to compare this to somebody wearing clothes, because it's a bit like if you went out on a really cold day and you wore like a really, really, really short kind of down sort of puffer jacket, and it kind of got down to about your belly button, but you left kind of a whole load of your belly free, and kind of just like there's nothing on, and or you wore shorts or something like that. Actually you might be really, part of you might be really well insulated, but part of you isn't. You're going to be cold. Also, I guess if you're underneath a duvet, but you're only half of you is underneath the duvet, so actually you end up in a situation where half of you is really warm and half of you is really cold. It's not it's not a situation you want to be in really if it's really cold outside. And it's the same for your house. You know, if you do leave big gaps like this in the insulation, you're going to get a lot of heat leaving through there. And really it starts to become, you know, this house, I don't know if it's worth doing, just from a perspective of whether it'll actually save any money, which given they've probably spent the best part of £10,000 on that house, you think, well, if you haven't achieved anything, that's a big waste. But more worryingly, what will happen is you'll get a really cold surface inside where that is, because that's where all the heat's going to leave. And that cold surface is exactly where all the moisture in your house is going to condense, and you're going to get some damp problems. So that could be a key problem. And that can happen quite a lot. And the reason I bring that up really is that kind of thing can happen quite a lot where you have rushed jobs. You don't have time to move, for example, a gas meter, which is on the outside of your home, and to have it so that you know the insulation runs behind that meter, or you know any other thing that you don't have time to move, and that's worth thinking about because you don't want to do that really. There are lots of other problems with those houses, so but I'm going to skirt past them. But I have to mention that the thermal bridging is not the only problem in these particular houses. But there are other places you can get thermal bridging. It's not only about external wall insulation. I've seen houses in Plymouth, for example, that have got a concrete roof to the porch, just outside their front door. And that roof, quite often, that piece of concrete just goes right through the cavity in that wall, right to the inside wall. And so any cavity wall insulation is completely bypassed there, and you get this cold bridge. So ideally, you really want your installer to be thinking about that and thinking about how they can overcome that cold bridge and make sure that it's not making your, you know, it's not kind of negating a lot of the value of your insulation. The last one is air leakage. And I mentioned earlier about comfort, and Claire mentioned earlier that another thing that has a big impact on comfort is drafts. And so drafts are one part of kind of the air leakage equation, if you like. But just to be clear, there's a difference between ventilation and air leakage. I have heard people say you need a bit of air leaking in a building, otherwise you can get, you know, it can get damp and it can get kind of, you know, not fresh air. You do need ventilation, and part of your ventilation strategy might just have, you know, they trickle vents in the window or something like that. But you do need ventilation, that's definitely true, and that can be provided by windows, it could be provided by extractor fans. There are various forms of doing that, some much more high level ones, kind of heat recovery fans that suck out the warm air from your house that's damp and stale and replace that with dry fresh air, but they use the air they're sucking out to warm the incoming air. So if you want to go really advanced, there's really great ventilation systems for that. But I don't agree with the statement that you need lots of drafts in your house to keep it dry. Quite often it does exactly the opposite. So the aim is to kind of reduce that unplanned and uncontrolled loss of warm air from a building, and to keep that controlled air, the stuff that you're going to get the same amount of ventilation, whether it's blowing a gale outside or whether it's, you know, relatively still outside. And there's some common causes of air leakage. I won't run through them all. A huge one, though, is chimneys to look at there. And on the right there, there's the thermal imaging. So we mentioned that one of the things that's covered by this is thermal imaging cameras. It's thermal imaging camera kind of picking up on some air leakage coming kind of below a door there. It's a cold surface. The other thing that can happen with air leakage, which can start to get really quite more risky, is if you're getting air leakage getting in behind insulation. Because what you can then get is really warm air from inside your house getting in behind the insulation into a kind of cold area, for example, your attic. So if you've got loft insulation and you're getting lots of air going up through the loft hatch in from kind of halogen downlighters or something in the ceilings, and it's getting through the insulation into the attic, and then it's getting into a really cold space, and it's condensing there, because that's what moisture does. You can hold lots of moisture in warm air, but you can't hold much in cold air, and so then you start to get damp in the attic. In that case, it's quite easy to deal with. You just need to cut some vents into the soffits of your attic, so right kind of in the eaves, or various ways of doing that. So and there's a lot of builders and installers that would be very competent and confident in knowing how to do that. Can get a little bit more risky though when you're looking at something like internal wall insulation. So that's another type of solid wall insulation where you would kind of put insulation on the inside of your walls, and you'd kind of increase the thickness of your walls on the inside a little bit, but make them warmer. So that's a bit of doom and gloom, I'm afraid, about the risks of retrofitting. But here's, I think, hopefully a useful slide for you in terms of just making a decision where, if you're looking at your house, where are you on this? Are you in the lower risk scenario or the higher risk scenario? So is your home actually pretty well maintained and well ventilated? You've got no damp? Well, actually, okay, you can probably deal with some changes being made to how it functions and tolerate those quite well. But actually, if you've already got damp and you already know you have maintenance needs, I'd say it's best to deal with those before you start making really significant changes to your home. Similarly, as if it's an older home or a newer home, around house construction, and some of the other ones further down. So actually, one really thing that can lower the risk is you being really, really informed about the risks of doing it and really overseeing and taking an active role in overseeing that retrofit. And I've done a list of kind of the much lower risk measures and the much higher risk measures there. In the middle somewhere there, I'd put things like cavity wall insulation, floor insulation. Those, they can go wrong, but by and large, actually, most installers have got really good processes for that. And that point at the end there, right at the bottom, in terms of a long warranty, is quite important. And a lot of installers will offer a really long warranty with cavity wall insulation and floor insulation now. That does require that they do, really good inspections beforehand, and they follow quite a kind of strict way of installing it that does, really minimise those risks. The one risk in there that I haven't mentioned that I think is important is the builder in the middle, because I think, if I'm honest, over the next 6 months, because this is such a busy scheme, everything is in that high risk scenario. You've got a lot of people trying to get an awful lot of work done to take advantage of this scheme. I would say, and these figures are very rough and just from my very basic research, but I would say the total value of the energy retrofit sector in a normal year is about £1 billion, probably a bit less than that. They're now trying to install about £2 billion worth of work in 6 months. So that's a huge acceleration for that industry. And it will mean that there's a lot of people who are rushing a little bit. So that comes to this question, really. Is the Green Homes Grant right for me in your home? And it is going to be right for an awful lot of people. That all makes it sound like it's a really high risk thing to do, but it's just that those things need some considering. If you're showing up as high risk on some of those, you need to think about what work you're doing to the house. Is that going to cause any problems? So installers having very little capacity, that is going to be a problem if you're trying to do something quite bespoke. If you've got quite a complex house and you might need to ask installers to do something quite different to what they normally would do. Understandably, those installers that are trying to get an awful lot of work done very quickly might find some resistance to that, and you might find, it might not be resistance. It might just be that they're really trying to do that for you, but they're really struggling with their capacity to do it. Actually, if what you're doing is relatively off the shelf, things like your cavity wall insulation, your loft insulation, your floor insulation, all of those are reasonably well practiced, and or solid wall insulation, but your house is relatively simple, you may not struggle so much. You may have to work a little bit harder to keep on top of installers and make sure you're getting the appointments, because they will be busy, but it's not necessarily a risk to whether your project will go ahead successfully. But if you are trying to schedule it with other works, if you're doing a whole extension and lots of other work in your home, and you've got a builder that's doing a lot of that work, and you're trying to bring in an installer who can work under this scheme to do bits of that work, I think you'll find that a struggle, to be honest. And the prices may inflate due to demand. So if you have got that kind of scheme where it's only a small part of your wider scheme that you're trying to get covered from the Green Homes Grant, given that it may inflate the cost, it may be better to look at whether that work can be done by somebody who isn't accredited to work under this scheme, who may be able to charge a lower cost for that. You obviously need to be confident in the work that they're doing and that they know what they're doing. And there is a chance that works will rush to fit into the March deadline. I hope, and if I'm honest, hand on heart, suspect that the March deadline will not be a March deadline when it comes to March, that maybe this will end up being extended. But we don't know that at the moment. There's no indication of that at the moment. And if we are trying to get in that much work by the March deadline, there is going to be a lot of installers trying to hurry that through in the best way they can, without saying that they're just going to be trying to do a complete cowboy job. They are trying to try and get things done really quickly, and that might mean things get overlooked. So it's worth thinking that through. This isn't a really simple piece of work where you can just pick up the phone, somebody will come around, get it done. You don't have to think about it and don't have to manage it. I think under the Green Homes Grant, unless you're doing something quite simple, you are probably going to have to play a reasonably active role in keeping this going and keeping the work that's happening, particularly if you've got some of those more complex risky measures, really keeping an eye on that. There are some alternatives. So the first one there is in the last couple of weeks, the council and Plymouth Energy Community have secured a £3.4 million grant to improve 300 homes. So this is a part of the wider Green Home Grant, but one that's focused just on local authorities. So this is going to target E, F and G rated homes in the city. We won't be upgrading any home that isn't E, F or G rated. To be eligible for that, you do have to have a household income of below £30,000. And the way that's funded is a little bit different. It's not a maximum fund of £10,000, but on average, we need to spend less than or equal to £10,000. So we will have some houses that will spend more of that on to upgrade. We're trying to get them up to a grade C and an EPC. Some of them will be much less than that. So it's a bit more flexible in that way. And frankly, it will have the same problems around installer availability. We're not going to have an installer working with us. It will be the same market, but there will be a lot more support available. We have some funding to offer that support and to have some advisors coming in to offer that support. So if that is you, and really this is, trying to focus on households that might find it more difficult to access the wider Green Homes Grant here. And if that is you, then do get in touch with us when we send out these slides after, and we can put you on a waiting list as we start to set up that scheme. Similarly, the energy company obligation is particularly useful if you're somebody who fits into that gap between the Green Homes Grant, which provides extra funding for households who receive specific benefits and tax credits. So if that isn't you, but actually you do have an income of under £30,000, then you would qualify for grants under the energy company obligation in the city. And that under £30,000 is after your rental costs and your energy bills come out of account. So we're looking at net income after housing and energy under £30,000. So actually, if you are looking at cavity wall, floor insulation, loft insulation, you're probably likely to get 100% grant for that work or close to it. There's a bit of a top-up fund for the council at the moment that can cover, for example, floor where there might be a bit of a shortfall. So actually, I think the Green Homes Grant probably isn't the best thing for you, and you're better off going down something like the energy company obligation. If you're off the gas grid, so if you're heating with electricity, you might find that solid wall insulation is available through the energy company obligation as well. So actually, in that case, I think the Green Homes Grant probably isn't the best way for you. To be honest, most installers working under the Green Homes Grant will also be delivering under ECO, the energy company obligation. So this probably means contacting the same people, but maybe asking about a different form of funding. I know a lot of the installers are already seeing if people might be better off under ECO. You can't claim both grants, I should say. In fact, that's true for the above one as well, the Plymouth City Council and PEC. You can either claim that or the kind of national Green Homes Grant scheme we're talking about today. So the last option there is actually, if you are looking to do an awful lot of work to your house, if you've got, frankly, if you've got money and you want to do a really good job of this, and you're a bit nervous about the Green Homes Grant scheme and the kind of hurry on that, and you really want to, make it a nice job, and you're planning to be in your house for quite a while, we're in the process of trying to bring together a kind of personalised advice service. So that's quite a detailed kind of high-end advice report that will really help you to make a plan for how you might want to retrofit your home, and then some support to go alongside that. All of that we'll be charging for, but at a fair rate, at something that we're not looking to make a profit from the scheme. We're just looking to be able to provide a service that covers its own back, because we think there is a gap there that people need that sort of advice. So at some point next year, hopefully spring, we'll be looking to launch that. So nearly getting to the end of this now. So we've had a few questions already about an installer, and I know that this will come up quite a lot. There is a website, it's linked here, simpleenergyadvice.org.uk/installer search. And this has the up-to-date information about the installers that are accredited to work on the scheme. It looks like the image on the right there. So I've done a search for people who can do solid wall insulation with a Plymouth postcode. There's a couple of installers based within Plymouth and one in Cornwall. So there are some installers reasonably locally, and I think there will be more signing up as we go along. We do have until November to register for a voucher under this scheme. So there's about a month left, in terms of installers that are signing up. So if you can't find it, if you can't get through to anyone now, it's worth checking again in a week or two. But I would imagine some of those companies more locally will be picking up the phone and will be happy to speak to you. Some of the companies I've spoken to have said that they're going to be providing an indicative quote. So you can ring them up, they'll find out a bit about your house and they'll tell you roughly what they think it will cost. I think that's probably quite a good idea for a lot of companies. And if you're happy with, a quote from one person or two people, then you can get them to come and actually have a look at it. In general, though, I do think it's sensible to get more than one quote. I do understand for installers that this is hard and they've got a lot of people trying to go around doing quotes, but from your perspective, if I'm advising a householder, I think it's the best thing. You never know. If you only have one quote, then you have nothing to judge that against, and that's not a good thing. And some key things, I really wouldn't advise paying a deposit until, really very short. If an installer is asking for a deposit in general, I think it's best practice not to. You shouldn't really pay anything until it's installed. But if they are asking it, and some maybe, then I would negotiate that you pay it, like a day before or 2 days before the installation. I wouldn't want to pay it hugely before then. And I really wouldn't pay any kind of final bill for the work until it really is all completed to your satisfaction and all the scaffolding is down and that side of things. I've had too many stories of people who've paid it, when the people first went away and we'll come back and clear up this and do the scaffolding and just finish off that edge there, and you really have lost all your power at that point. There is ways to address issues there, but it's more difficult, so really do wait. And if you're being pressured about that, then I would suggest actually it might be worth talking to Trading Standards, because they shouldn't be pressuring you to pay anything until it really is all complete to your satisfaction. So last little bits, because we've talked a lot about various things and I've raised some questions here that I realise that we're not able to provide the kind of one-to-one advice that you might need to answer that. But here is some ideas about where you might be able to get personalised advice about your home. So there is a relatively new qualification called the Retrofit Assessor qualification, which is really like the energy performance certificates that you get when you buy or rent a house, but it's a bit more specialised than that and it's a bit more detailed. There are some retrofit assessors available. Sorry, I see the slide there says retrofit advisors. That's a different thing. It is retrofit assessors what you're looking for, and that usually costs about £100 to £200. That cost can be claimed back against the grant. And that should give you a good indication of the kind of measures that could be fitted to your home. And actually, they should be good to have a good chat with as they go around your house. You want to be there and having a good talk to them about it, because people who are doing that qualification should be relatively informed about what the kind of process of installing that would be, what that would look like for you, how disruptive it might be. And if you are looking to do much more extensive work, if you've got a much bigger budget and your building is quite complicated, there is a more in-depth report. You could do a kind of SAP report, a full SAP report that looks at things in a bit more detail. And that would give you a better assessment of things like what the likely energy savings would be. Also, I mentioned before about an air tightness test. Again, if you're doing quite a lot of work, I do think it might be worth investing in that, because it gives you a really good idea of how much heat you're losing through the air. I mean, for most reasonably well insulated houses, air leakage is the biggest form of heat loss in your home. That's the thing that you're paying the most for. So trying to tackle that as you go along is a good idea. And an infrared camera might be good, particularly if you're looking at areas like cold bridging, which I mentioned earlier, and air loss again can help with that. And you know, advice from an architect or building designers. All of those things, I think Claire mentioned earlier, can be covered under the grant, so it can be reclaimed. So are worth thinking about in terms of that personalised advice. There's also quite a lot of useful information online that I would say. And I mentioned before, we didn't go into a lot of detail about the different measures, but there is good advice available about those, about what that would mean, how that works, on really all of these websites. And I'd say that all of them are quite useful. I've used some diagrams from the Centre for Sustainable Energy, who've got a good kind of whole house retrofit guidance document, and kind of older homes retrofit guidance document as well, so a bit more specialist there. And then if you really want something a bit more detailed, if you really want something that's going to, you know, give you a few nights bedtime reading, there is some really good guidance on Historic England's page if you've got a really older home, if you've got an older home, about trying to make that more energy efficient in a way that's sensitive to the kind of heritage of the building and to the way that it functions. A Bristolian's Guide to Solid Wall Insulation is a little bit mislocated, but actually a lot of it is also true of Plymouth, so it's really worth looking at. And it's got some really good guidance if you are looking at having your walls insulated. You know, if you've got solid walls and you're looking at having them insulated. And even more technical than that is the SDBA. And on the spot, I can't tell you what SDBA stands for, but it's a kind of protection of kind of older buildings organisation. And they've got this guidance wheel, which has got lots of information on it. Takes a little while to get your head around, and really, I would say you probably want to have quite a good technical understanding before you go to that. Otherwise, you'll completely bamboozle yourself. But if you have got that and you're looking for that kind of much more detailed advice, then that's a really, really useful source. So that is our run through of the Green Homes Grant, and all the information we've got. We have got slightly less than I said, about 23 minutes for questions. I can always be trusted to go on for slightly longer than I ought to. So I'm going to unmute you, allow you all to unmute, and jump in if you have questions.
We've got
put them in chat. Yes,
we've got one really good question already, which is that the system asks for 3 quotes from a registered installer, which is currently quite difficult when you look for the installers on the search. Is that still a thing?
Well, I queried this a few weeks ago because the initial guidance that came out did say, and part of the reason why we're doing this much later, you know, obviously a lot of the press about the Green Homes Grant came through 2 months ago, and we could have done a webinar like this then, but we were kind of resistant to, because we thought that guidance might change. And yeah, a month or so ago, the guidance was that you do need to have 3 quotes from an installer, from installers, but that does seem to have changed in the last month. And all the guidance on the, explicitly the guidance on the website, the government website, is that they advise that you get 3 quotes, but you don't have to have 3 quotes. You can apply with just 1 quote. So I don't know whether this is a system that hasn't quite caught up, or whether it looks like you need 3 quotes. If you only submit 1, you can get through. Does anyone else have a similar experience? Has anyone else got there and found that that's a problem?
So it's not really necessary to have 3 quotes?
No, certainly that has changed. It isn't necessary anymore. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea, because it can be quite, daunting just to feel like that 3 quotes, and so I think 1 quote is enough. So
yeah, if you can get a second quote, I think it's useful to give a kind of benchmark. Actually, if you find out that your first quote was much more expensive than the second one, then that's useful to know, right? But yeah, I don't think you don't need. I know you don't.
I'd like to add that I've been trying for a while to get 3. It's extremely hard to get local ones at the moment. I've got one I'm just waiting to get 1 quote. The other one's a huge list at the moment, so I'm not sure I'm even going to get to. I'd be happy to get 2. I'll be honest. I don't think I'm going to be able to get 3.
Yeah. I think 3 would be very hard. That's why I said more than 1. It would be useful. I think 2 is a good thing to aim for.
Reasonable. 1 one is enough for, like, you know, I think that's very reasonable, just to have one coat, then stop all those hassles.
Can I come in on a couple of questions, please?
Of course.
Yeah, okay. You said earlier that you can get loft top up if you've got less than 150 mil. I've spoken to the Simple Energy Advice Line, and they tell me you can get a top up providing you're not up to 270 mil, which is the standard now. And the other thing is that the Simple Energy Advice Line has spoken to me about, because I'm having all sorts of problems getting installers, is that installers don't need to register with them, but they must have the trust mark, and quotations will be accepted from installers who've got the trust mark. Now, when you ring local installers, and I've rung 7, because I do get a loft, I am eligible for a loft top up and a replacement front door. The installers that come along, mainly for the replacement front doors, tell me that they're not participating, even though they're trust marked approved, and that's all they really need. So there's a lot of very confused installers out there, and the loft installers don't seem to be interested at all at this stage. Where did you get your 150 mil figure from?
So we may well be wrong on that one. That's usually the industry standard for.
Yeah, sure, I agree with that. Well, it used to be 100 mil, now it's 150. But they tell me on the advice line that it can be anything, providing you're not up to 270.
I would always go with what the advice line says. They're the ones contracted to give out the information and make sure the grants go through. Sure. There's an 0800 number for them as well, isn't there? That I think we should be sharing. Was it on one of our slides, Justin, or do I need to pop it in the chat?
It is, I think, on the last slide. Hold on. It's not. Hold on. Where did we put it? It is on one of the slides, or if it isn't, then it will be
0800
when they come out.
You've been talking today as well about installers needing to sign up for the scheme, when in fact that's not what I've been told. So the whole area is very complicated and very confused.
So you're right, Fred. I think it was a point in that slide about installers, and it's not one that I picked up on, which I meant to talk about. So you prompted me on that. So yeah, to be eligible to work under the scheme, an installer has to either be Trustmark accredited, if it's kind of insulation or any of those efficiency measures, or MCS accredited, which is microgeneration certification scheme. So that will be for any of the renewable heat measures. So what I have been unclear on, and what it sounds like you're saying, Fred, is that the installers which are on the Simple Energy Advice website, which we linked before, are not just all Trustmark. So it hasn't got all the Trustmark accredited installers on there. It only has the ones that have registered themselves on that site.
Yeah, sure.
So you might be able to find other Trustmark accredited installers who haven't registered for it, but your experience is they probably don't want to operate under this scheme. They probably don't want to bother with it. You
can go onto the Trustmark site and search and then get on, which is the way I went through it. But and of course, the time scale for getting a replacement front door is at least 8 to 10 weeks. So you're getting near March again.
Yeah. And I think that's the guidance I would give. This scheme might work quite well for you if you're perfectly patient. You're willing to put some effort into finding the right installers.
We'll be back in the summer soon.
and I'd say I would, if you want that front door, I would sign up for that kind of 8 week. If you're happy for that to come a bit later, I'd sign up for that, because that March deadline might move, and you don't want to then come back to it in March and try to be sorted out.
I can't do that because I can't get anybody to get me a quote from a primary measure.
Okay, yeah. What is your primary measure, Fred?
Loft top up, loft insulation.
Okay. Who have you spoken to? So I know let's not do that publicly. Actually,
no.
In fact, I might drop you an email afterwards, Fred, with a couple of people it might be worth speaking to.
That would be helpful if you could, please. Yeah. Because I've even dropped my MP an email this weekend telling him what the chaos is down here. So that'll be interesting.
Actually, let's do that publicly. So we don't endorse anybody in particularly. I'm not giving this a recommendation there, but there are people we have worked with in the past that wouldn't show up, because there is people within Plymouth, which I'm assuming you've already spoken to and haven't got anywhere. But the other company that we have dealt with in this area in the past is a company called Evolve Home Energy Solutions. and I know they are covering this area, and they have got a team in this area. So if it would be worth speaking to them as well as the ones which would show up in Plymouth anyway.
Yeah.
So these installers are supposed to be working for Plymouth City Council as well, or?
No, so none of the installers are working for Plymouth City Council. In fact, with this wider scheme,
So I'm talking to, sorry, I'm talking to my son. Yeah.
So for this wider scheme that we were talking about mostly today, it has absolutely no relation to Plymouth City Council. The scheme that we'll be working with Plymouth City Council, it's also a grant scheme. So anybody going through that can choose their own installer. So it's the same, cohort of installers really, but you will have a bit more support because there's some funding in there for Plymouth Energy.
As a single parent, I just can't wait because I'm suffering a lot of problems with this flat roof in my home here, and I just can't wait it being done. I've suffered it for a long time, and that's like, my God, I just can't wait for it now. Because it's winter as well, and it's getting cold, so that's the problem. Because flat roof, Devon is not always sunny, I know that. So Plymouth is always have a strong rain. So.
We'll have a look at that other scheme that we'll be doing with the council, because it might be that we'll have more direct communication with installers about that, and we'll have more kind of staff to chase things through. It may be better if it suits you, if you're eligible for it. It may be that it's the way of getting that done. Yeah,
it's just that I'm just concerned how the installer should be just local in Plymouth anyway, a trusty one.
Yeah, I think what we've obviously been calling for a number of years is kind of more sustained funding like this to grow the industry over a kind of more time. And this is, very welcome to get some funding for these kind of measures, but it is quite quick and actually that industry is struggling to keep up with the demand, I think it's fair to say.
Well, all the best, Plymouth. So I think everyone needs help nowadays for all this, plus the COVID issue. So yeah, hopefully we all get help from it.
Got any more questions?
Yes, just it's Mark here. I've with external cladding insulation. My tenant's house is 1840, but surely in a way, December to March is really the wrong time of year to fit that, because the walls are cold and damp. And that's where I would be really concerned about. I would prefer it to be fitted in the summer, but this green homes, as a landlord, I can't do anything other than green homes.
I would suggest. I mean, yeah, I think you are absolutely right. Usually, two things you want to avoid with external wall insulation, and that is putting cladding on top of wet walls already. And also the final finish of that insulation for most types of external wall insulation needs about 3 dry days in a row, something like that. It might be longer than that, but needs a few dry days in order to cure off properly. And obviously that makes November to March being not the best time of the year to do that. And I think that again is another real problem that this industry is going to be up against quite a lot. I would say I do in my heart think it might be quite likely that it will extend beyond March. We are seeing this problem with capacity already. Things may change. The government may change its mind. They do that sometimes. And so I would say it may well be worth getting a quote, registering a voucher. You don't have to. You can pull out and say, I don't want to do this right now. It's too wet. But it leaves you in a position where you've got a voucher. You've got something you can take forwards if they do extend it, and then you can look to get that done in, May, June next year instead. It may not work. You may just have to leave it, but it's an option.
Thank you, Justin. Obviously, it's my tenants that suffer, not me.
Yeah, hopefully that will be extended, because it can be quite awkward now. A lot of work, and it's tricky, isn't it, for the amount of that time. Hopefully the government will adjust it in a long period of time, because it is a repairs we're talking about here, so they cannot do it magically.
They got flat roof, they got external walls, and it's the heating bill in the house is horrendous. and yet I'm, you know, under the Plymouth, I'll
yes,
be tied because I'm a landlord. But
exactly.
it's not me that's paying the bills.
No.
Unless the tenants can do it on their own, but I don't think they can do that, can they? It's got to go through myself.
You're correct. Yeah, it does have to go through you.
Yeah.
If they do need support to stay warm and well at home in the meantime over the winter period, do give them our contacts. The energy team provide free support to residents who are struggling to manage the bills.
Exactly, we all have
use their
struggle.
heating
So,
yeah, and more
yes.
and more. Everybody's at home.
Exactly.
You know, the bills are going up. The food bills are going up. Your income's coming down. It's a difficult time for a lot of people.
It's a lot of difficulties now than it used to be.
Yeah. I'll put the general number on the chat as well. So this is for the energy team. I put the email up a moment ago, so I'll just add the phone number now.
We've got any more questions, or anybody else who's experienced kind of scheme so far and have got some kind of frustrations that they're waiting on?
I think we discussed quite a lot already, and I think hopefully it will go well for all the Plymouth residents, really, especially in winter times. It seems really it's COVID is not helping at all, and I hope this will go smoothly for us all, and all the best.
Can I just say a big thank you for both Claire Louise and
thank you very much.
I think you've explained it extremely well. It was worth waiting for. And it's just, I think there's going to be a bit of a nightmare getting these estimates. To say I've been waiting 2 weeks. I must check my tenant because obviously she had the contact details, and they may have contacted her direct. I don't think they have, but I think I need to do a bit of chasing around. Thank you very much. Thank you.
One of the experiences I've had is that when one of the companies called me and said, "What are you interested in?" and I said, "Loft insulation and front door." They said, "Do you have a water tank, hot water tank?" I said, "Yes." "Oh, well, we can provide solar energy for heating your water. So shall we provide that as well?"
They're upselling to you, are they? Trying to get the most out of the grant.
Yeah. Anyway, they said they will contact me. We shall see.
Well, I think if we don't have any more questions, shall we call it a day there? We will send out, as we said, the slides and this information afterwards. I might include in that just a quick kind of call for, you know, if anybody do you think they might be eligible for the wider and interested in the wider council scheme, then you kind of reply to that. And I might ask for a bit more information, just to, you know, in terms of how useful you found this, or anything we might want to do that would make it more useful another time.
You can send me those contacts, Justin. I'd appreciate it.
Will do.
Thank you. Yeah,
thank
good
you.
session. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Claire and Justin.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Okay.
Thank you. All the best.
Yeah, bye.